Hey there everybody, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast. Today my guests are Stuart, Cheetham and Sarah Hampson, marketing and sales gurus, and that's my words, not theirs, of the incredible company Ruth Lee Ltd. Ruth Lee Ltd are leading manufacturers of rescue training mannequins. They serve 100% of the UK's fire and rescue services, police and ambulances. They also supply the military, NATO, all of the UK's international airports, along with several aviation training centres. They work in offshore drilling facilities, they do chemical and oil companies. They have a massive range of dummies and done extensive research in tailor-making them for particular training scenarios all over the world. They work with RLNI, water rescue, health and safety experts, industry specialists from the areas of working at height, healthcare, and so many more. And even though we're a self-proclaimed supporter of all of our UK companies, they also distribute to USA, Australia, Germany, and other biggest international markets. All of this, which came from humble beginnings, and Ron and Ruth Lee themselves. Before we jump in there with Stu and Sarah, let's hear from our podcast family. Willingwood Watches is a UK-based watch manufacturer where upcycling is taken to a whole new level. Willingwood are all about history on your wrist and feeling the beat of the fire service with you every step of the way. Willingwood Watches has the vision to be the leading sustainable watch brand that upcycles rescue service materials for a new life, once forgotten, now reborn. So get over, have a look, get yourself registered, and check out some of the incredible stuff at willingwoodwatches.com. PBI Performance Products. PBI products are protection without compromise. Now, PBI fabrics have been renowned for their unique combination of flame resistance, durability, and comfort. I have worn PBI products since starting my career 13 years now, and they are the very first choice in protection for pretty much every extreme condition, from NASA astronauts to emergency responders, the military, Formula One. The business opened up in 1984, and they have created a legacy of protection that is recognized all over the world. We are so privileged to have them as a sponsor on the podcast. If you want to hear more about it, go over to pbiproducts.com or just check in the notes below. You will find a link to PBI. Well, there we have it, folks. That's the names in the frames. Now, personally, I'm really selfishly been looking forward to today's episode. I've been using Ruth Lee dummies for over 13 years as an operational firefighter. I've used their firehouse mannequins, I've used their dog mannequins, I've used their bariatrics, and now to see them moving into so many other areas of training simulation, fire simulation, virtual training, and so much more. Casualties, dummies, training environments, and resources to help those first responders, emergency operators, and heroes of our community be the very best versions of themselves when it counts in the moment. Thank you for coming back to the Firefighters Podcast. Let's jump in there with Stu and Sarah, and I will see you on the other side. Sarah and Stu, welcome to the Firefighters Podcast. How are we doing?
Good, thank you.
Very good, thanks.
Thank you for coming on and joining us. Now, today we've sort of come together through our mutual connection through the Emergency Services show, but long before that, I mean, I've been an operational firefighter for about 13 years. I didn't actually know that Ruth Lee wasn't the only sort of manufacturer of emergency services, dummies and all that sort of stuff. So it was a real sort of revelation to me when I started delving into some of the wonderful distributors at the show that Ruth Lee had been manufacturing mannequins all the way back since the 1980s. Is that right?
Well, back in the 1980s, Ron and Ruth Lee had a business in Liverpool, Merseyside. It was a different business, completely different. Ron was a blacksmith by trade, and Ruth was a seamstress. She had skills with the machine, and they used to repair the old-fashioned silver cross prams. That's kind of like their background. But they also were sort of well-known locally for the high-quality workmanship that they sort of produced. So when a friend of theirs from, I think it was Merseyside Fire Brigade, popped in with a basically bag of sand and said, "Can you repair my dummy?" Ruth looked at it and said, "I'll make you a better one." And that's kind of how it all started.
I love how the actual name came from one of the owners, because you don't necessarily see that as much anymore. We're all trying to think of some really amazing names that came down from the gods or something like that. But there's such an authenticity behind Ruth Lee. So, I mean, I've jumped straight ahead there, but just for as a quick introduction, Sarah, could you tell us your role in the company?
My role is International Development Manager. I started off with Ruth Lee about 4 years ago, just over now. Coming up to 4.5 years, actually. Right. You know, my background is in marketing, so basically marketing communications. So all the social media stuff and that kind of thing is usually done by me. So that's my background for Ruth Lee.
And Stu, you good self?
Yes, I started with the business 10 years ago, next month, actually.
A decade.
Almost. So I actually started in the business as sales and marketing manager. First role, sales role within the business, marketing role within the business.
Yeah.
Over the years, my role has changed. I think by 2016, within 5 years, of being in the business, the way that the business was growing, we recognised that my role had become so diverse that we needed to be able to focus. I focused on sales, so I became national sales manager as opposed to sales and marketing. And that's where Sarah joined the business as marketing manager.
I think people operating in a small business sometimes struggle with the differences between sales and marketing. And they are, whilst they exist in the same realm, it must have been difficult for you to pivot and decide, or if it's decided for you, where your speciality truly lies in a company like that.
It does. I mean, obviously, I've got a very mixed background. So previously I have had roles within marketing, but I've also had roles within sales as well. But I've always felt very much more inclined towards sales rather than marketing. So that it was that the choice was given to me. Which way did I want to go? And I chose to focus on the sales, getting out and meeting firefighters, and
that's it. You've got to love it. I speak to a lot of exhibitors that operate in this industry, and it's a really, really strange and unique thing, and especially for a company like Ruth Lee, because what you do and the customers that you serve are, for want of a better description, without being too egotistical, it's the heroes of our communities, and does that make it easier to go to quote unquote work? Because it's a really, really incredible thing that you guys do.
100%. Yeah, definitely.
We talk about this quite a lot, don't we? Especially when, as Stuart's mentioned about growing, the company's grown massively in the 4 years that I've been here. And one of the things that we often say when we're trying to recruit people is to make sure that we find people who feel so passionately as we do about that situation, because your customers and the end users are what everybody sees as everyday heroes. You know, our customers are nurses, they're firemen, they're lifeguards, they're the RNLI, all people who fall under that bracket very deservedly of heroes. So yeah, of course, you know, you have a certain degree of pride thinking that you're providing the products that help them to train to do their jobs better. I
mean, this is probably a really bad question, because the individuals I've met of your company, of this sector, are the only ones that fit the mold that you described. But the question I wanted to ask is, do you find that's a little bit rarer in finding, because I love to get really, really corny about what we do, because if you don't get that, it's hard to, well, it's not hard, it's almost impossible to fake it. You've got to be really passionate about what you do, otherwise people see straight through it. Have you ever had those examples where you see, and we're not going to point fingers or anything like that, but people moving into this sector, either coming to try and interview for like Ruth Lee or other companies trying to move into it, and thinking that they are just serving another customer base? I said to somebody the other day, we're not making straws for McDonald's at the end of the day. You've got to really have, and if we talk about, product innovation, I've got a massive list of all the mannequins, because again, naively, I operate in the fire service, but the breadth and range, and I don't want to get onto it yet because I want to get onto it in a minute, but when you start looking at innovation in the products and stuff like that, you've really got to have that childlike curiosity about it. But do you find that authenticity is as prevalent as I see it in Ruth Lee, or is that still as much in all over the sector for the emergency services?
I think in terms of, my perfect example is when we're interviewing for roles. So, for example, in the past I've interviewed for sales head roles here within the company, and I'd say the vast majority of people who we've interviewed have always come to us and applied for the role because they have seen the sphere that we work within and the people that we're supplying to. Yeah. And that's been a big driver for them. I mean, speaking personally, from sales perspective, I couldn't go and sell, for example, McDonald's straws.
Yeah.
I have to be passionate about
and
a product.
That's honest.
Yeah. So for me, I have to have a real passion for a product to be able to sell it and get excited about it. Who we're selling to and what that actually means, that the product, and what it enables people to do in terms of training.
Do you think there's an aspect of personal standards in that? Because like I mean, before we went live on the podcast here, I sort of shared with you guys a few of the notes that I'd been looking at, and I've got like 5 pages of notes, and this is just for a conversation with you guys. And I think when people come and apply for the fire service, or I hear them going to work for a company that is a niche company such as yours, that sometimes they don't do the legwork anymore. And I don't know if that's I don't want to get into a nature nurture thing, I don't know if it's a generational thing, but I don't know if people are scared to be passionate about things now, or we're all trying to fit into the same box. But I mean, people will look at a company like yours and idolize it and go, wow, you've really found an incredible niche. But I think there's half a truth there, because it's only become such an incredible niche because you've been so passionate about it. You didn't become passionate about it when it became successful. You know, the origin of the company, as you referred to it there, Sarah, is that, you know, it came from a passionate place. There was a firefighter once involved, and there was Ruth and Ron trying to help him. It already had the passion. Some people think they'll find something and become passionate about it. And I'm like, no, you've got to find out if you're passionate about it first. You've got to do the prep. I always think like I'm preparing for a job interview when I even just talk to somebody. And this is just for, I mean, I value it greatly, but this is just for one conversation. People that expect to go and have a decade at a job like you've had to do, they don't prepare for it. What? I mean, I don't want to get into a recruitment pitch, but why do you think that is?
I think there's another thing that as well is, you learn through experience, don't you? The older you get, the more years you've got under your belt, the more you sort of see what does actually have a genuine impact on the world. So, I suppose because I work in marketing and there's a lot of things like design elements and photography, etc. Maybe young people don't see that as exciting to be working in the emergency services. When they get there, they realise actually this is amazing. Everyone
if you're a photographer or a marketer, oh my god, it's a gift for you, isn't it?
Like it just gives you instant content for your work. And when you actually start working in the services or for the emergency services, grows that passion for it. So I think there's something about that as well in terms of as you get older, you begin to realise what is important. It's not about selling jeans or something really flashy or exciting like a Porsche or whatever. It's actually these are the things that matter, and actually over time you realise what's important.
I think echoing that, Sarah, I mean if I look at my personal history, Sarah knows this, but before working for Ruth Lee, I worked for a company that manufactures performance car parts for Japanese sports cars, also have a drift team. So
I love how you navigated the description of that. Carry on.
I'm trying not to aim it at the particular brand.
There we go.
But essentially that to me, big passion of mine. But when the opportunity arose with Ruth Lee, at that time I was a father of two kids, the opportunity to go and work for a company that was making such a difference to people's lives and to potentially have an impact. That was the main driver for me leaving that world and moving into the emergency services.
You know what?
I think it's about showcasing the opportunity, isn't it? Because a lot of young people, a lot of young boys, particularly, probably want to grow up to be a fireman, don't you? It's quite a stereotypical thing.
Firefighter. Honestly, no, but fireman, firefighter.
That's kind of that thing, though, isn't it? Young people look up to the services and want to be there, but they don't realise that in the peripheral, around the edges, there's lots of industries that actually have an impact on those services as well, and offer equally interesting and exciting careers, I suppose.
I think that can be really empowering for people that through a learning difficulty or a physical limitation can find a way. I mean, we have some incredible companies and brands that we work with in the fire service, but even within the fire service, there's control staff, there's lots of backroom individuals that support with our rescue facilities, organising training, the admin sides of it. There's so many ways. It's a little bit like the astronaut story where you go up to the top and you say to the cleaner, "What's your job?" You just mop the floors, and he goes, "No, I put a man on the moon." And you go, "Well, you don't, do you?" And it's like, yeah, he does, because without all of the people providing Ruth Lee mannequins, how are we gonna? We'll try and do it with people, yeah, but it's not going to be the same, and you're not going to be able to do the training realistically, and that's going to make you less effective when you get there. When you get there and you're actually handling that body for the first time. I mean, I said that I'd only ever experienced Ruth Lee myself, because I'm looking at my notes now. You provide 100% of the UK's fire and rescue services sort of dummies, but you also do police, ambulance, NATO, and I could bore people with a list of about 50 or so others. That must be quite frustrating, with all due respect to your competitors. You've got 100% of the fire and rescue service market. How did you become so well respected? How did the word get out? It's almost like, when somebody says, "Let's Google it," they don't say, "Let's do an internet search, let's Google it." People wouldn't say to me, "Go and grab the dummy." They'd go, "Oh, we've got a Ruth Lee on the first floor." And even if it wasn't a Ruth Lee, they would already say that, because we think rescue dummies, that's the only... But that's it. Do you know what I mean? People know what it is when you say it. How did that market dominance... Has it always been there?
I mean, that's in the UK as well, isn't it, bearing in mind?
In the
UK we've had fantastic success. Yeah, I mean, and we're growing strongly all across the world, but for sure the UK, it's lovely to be in that position where people know the dummies as Ruth Lee. They quite often get called Ruth. The man overboard mannequins get called Dead Fred. They have their own little names and personalities almost, and it's lovely to become in that position as a marketing person in sales. Obviously fantastic, but it's grown because of the sheer strength of character, I think, of people like Ruth, who believed in what she was making. She set off. She sold the first mannequin. They ordered more when they saw them, used them straight away. They were like, "These are brilliant." And then she thought, well, actually, if Merseyside liked them, maybe North Wales would like them, maybe Cheshire would like them. And then she got in her car Was she 58, Stuart, I think?
She was 58 when she made the transition to start manufacturing.
I love that. I love what that says about how people can continue to reinvent themselves. You know, we had Colonel Sanders was in his 60s when he grew it, and Ray Kroc, you know, similar in his 50s. Sorry, please go on.
Yeah. No, she's just an inspirational lady. You know, she got into she saw the opportunity. She'd made something that had a positive difference to people, and she thought, right, okay, how can I start to get these mannequins in front of other people? And she did the old-fashioned sales approach of getting into a car and taking them all around the UK to show people. Stuart's probably got quite a good story about the military, haven't you, Stuart, with that one?
Yeah, essentially, she decided that she wanted to sell to the military. And so she made her way to MOD Abbeywood, and
of course, just show up at the front gates. I'm sure they'll let us in.
She did, and
Love it.
She did get in, and she actually got to the point where they wanted to see her purely for the fact they wanted to know how did she get past the front desk at MOD Abbeywood.
Character.
Essentially, that's how we originally started supplying to the MOD. It was literally Ruth's perseverance of going through and saying, "Look, I've got a product I want to show you," and getting past the front door.
But you know, that echoes back the idea of when we spoke about passion and intention. If you go in with a good intention, you're not going to know the intricacies of how this proverbial journey is going to pan out. But if you go in with a good determination, you go in with good intention, you know your moral compass. She wasn't trying to get in there for any nefarious or malicious intent. She was going with a good, sincere desire to try and help somebody. And if you go with that intention in a lot of things in life, I think we could all agree that you tend to make a lot more progress. And the person that demands they know every single step as to, well, who do I need to speak to when I get there? How am I going to get in? How am I going to get past the front gate? Those answers aren't going to be for you. I mean, you guys, I mean, I'm looking now, you've got over 20 different dummies that I was looking at yesterday, which just blew my mind. That was never an intention to start with, but you know, connecting the dots moving backwards, it seems like it has a really logical sense, but it all starts with that best intention, I suppose.
It does, and I think that obviously touched on that range of mannequins that we do. That's all come from various conversations and meetings that we've had with firefighters, with paramedics, with police officers who've said, look, your mannequins are great, but it doesn't do this. What we need is something that does this and fulfills that training need. So
and you know what? I don't think you would be as, and I'm sure you know that yourself, you wouldn't be as prolific if you weren't humble enough to take that feedback from day one, because ultimately, I mean, you've got, like we said, 100% of the market certainly here, and you're a massive contender all over the world. But you could just rest on your laurels and go, well, you know what? We're the best and the biggest, so if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. Oh, guess what? There is nowhere else to go.
No, that's why the countries are switching as well. You know, they've seen actually that, you know, rather than just being prescribed a dummy, here you go, here's your dummy, and it'll do this. We listen to the customers and make the changes that need to be made so that they can perform the best that they can in a particular training scenario, because there's no point having a dummy that won't sit in a harness if your speciality is rope rescue, for example. Or,
I love that.
You know, so we always take on board that sort of customer feedback. And of course, that's what Kay is held up and is considered to be a leader across the world, isn't it, in terms of safety training. Around the world, people see British firefighters, British military using our mannequins, and it becomes why would you use anything else type scenario.
I love that when you get to the point where people aren't trying to think of reasons to do it, they're trying to think of reasons why is it not the obvious decision, because it just seems so overwhelmingly clear. I mean, let's jump into some of the different variations, because when I was looking at it yesterday, I was speaking to my wife and I said, do you know what, did you know Ruth Lee do 20 different dummies? And with all due respect to her, she was like, 20? She says, aren't they all pretty similar? And I'm like, no, they're not, to be honest. I mean, yeah, they perhaps will resemble a person with respect to the dog mannequins and stuff like that. But as I started listing through them, it really blew me away. And you know what? One of the big game changers for me when I was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when in my own service we were experiencing a lot of bariatrics, we're experiencing a lot of casualties stuck in homes for a very prolonged period of time, and we have our big ground sheets and our lifting mechanisms, but it's incredibly hard to safely simulate a training like that. So I mean, I just wanted to start on that one if we could. It sounds obvious, but how did you come up with the idea for the bariatric one, and how did you feel confident enough that was going to be a big enough market for it?
Well, essentially, again, it started as a request from the customer. We were approached, I can't remember which service it was now. It was actually before my time, which shows you how long we've been making them. So we were approached by a service. He said, look, we have this very real need to train for bariatric rescues. And so we developed, working with the organisation, the mannequin, and we said, what weight does it need to be? What size does it need to be?
That was what blew me away as well, because
this is it.
Some of the fire service casualties that we trained with, maybe some of your earlier models, are around obviously we have the babies, we have the 50s, and I think one of the heaviest we've got is maybe a 60 or a 70 kilo. My numbers aren't quite there with that. But when I was reading in your bariatrics, you really do go all the way. I mean, there's a 90 kilo one, which is 15 stone-ish, I imagine. And then you've got a 180, which is obviously 30 stone. But you've got a 260 kilo dummy.
We've been told they're not heavy enough as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
Before now. We've been told that they need
260.
heavier.
That is, what's that? That's 50 or 60, that's
40
60,
stone.
40 stone.
40
Yeah.
stone.
And we've been told that they need to be heavier before now.
Yeah,
I suppose it's just
I think when people get that big,
isn't it? But
with all due respect, when people get that big, it's hard to quantify how big or how heavy, not specifically big, they really are, because this is really quite. I mean, all the existence of the need for casualty dummies and stuff like that is both tragic but necessary. But when you hear there's a need and a desire to have a training bariatric because we are facing that many, but without getting into a health pandemic conversation, the expanding waistline of the Western world and most of the world, unfortunately, means that we do come across a lot of bariatric incidents to start with. But this was requested by a fire service or by a police service or military. Fire service. Fire service.
It was by the fire service. The original need. I mean, obviously, subsequent conversations I've had with various ambulance services. When we've exhibited the emergency services show in the past, we've had a bariatric mannequin on the stand. And
I remember trying to move it once. I remember trying to get my hands on it and drag it, and I was like, I'm sure it's not that heavy. I couldn't even move it, so that was a moment of pride.
Exactly.
I had to swallow some pride there.
I said, I mean, we moved him around on a pallet truck because there's no way we're manhandling him.
No.
But paramedics were coming up to us and said, look, I dealt with a guy the other day with 63 stone, and how do you train for that? And the only way you can train for it is with a realistic weight. If you don't have a realistic weight, you don't get to experience what it feels like.
No. Because I've had people say, we'll just load up a pallet and we'll try and move the pallet around. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way, because the limbs, some of the people, the weight on their upper arm and stuff like that. And they don't, obviously a pallet doesn't move like that. But there is a couple of really not very good dummies out there, but they don't move like, and it sounds horrible, like an unconscious person. And you guys have really, really you've obviously done so much. How do you do the research into how the mannequins should move? Because the articulation in the joints is something that's really, really good about your mannequins, because they feel, sounds silly, they feel like a person.
Yeah, I mean, it's purely from, obviously, Lawrence Lee, who used to work in the business operationally. He's the son of Ruth, was an operational firefighter. So he worked for Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service for a number of years until his retirement from the service, and at which point he joined the business. He was instrumental in a lot of our product development in terms of articulation. And so he had experience of handling people and knew what it should feel like. And so it was his experience that we used and utilised to actually develop a lot of the mannequins.
But it says a lot about the other stakeholders in the company, because as a company grows like yours has to its tremendous heights, a lot of money gets involved, and the decision makers don't necessarily always tend to be people that have operational experience, just because they've spent their life in perhaps a more corporate environment. So having the willingness to listen to somebody with that authenticity can be really challenging. And you see some companies, a lot of companies, in all honesty, in my personal opinion, lose that because they think they know better.
Well, I mean, this year during the pandemic, I suppose Stuart and I get a good opportunity to speak to our customers, whether they are firemen, paramedics, or anybody else in between, really, at shows and the emergency service show, etc. But with the pandemic, it obviously changed the way things worked, and customer feedback is really, really important to make sure that we continue to develop the right sort of equipment. So we held a couple of, actually more than a couple, I think we had, was it about 5 or 6 panel discussions where we invited experts from different industries. There were firefighters amongst those, there were people who worked in aviation, there were people who worked in the maritime sector, and we got them together on a Zoom or Teams call, and we discussed what the future of training was. What is happening in training now? What do we think is going to happen in the future? What developments have they seen that they agree with? What don't they agree with? And that helps us move forward as a business. And, make sure that we are producing the right equipment, because there's no point us making a mannequin that we think somebody needs. We need to make something that they do need.
But what I love about that,
work properly.
What I love about that, and I was going to go there as well, so I'm glad you've jumped there for me, is this challenge that we have to have transformational and realistic training. I'm going to read from one of your notes now. It was the way it's always been done. Surely the most dangerous phrases in terms of training, because we've always done it this way. If it's not broke, don't fix it. That whole mentality. But your desire to facilitate as an industry leader and pull all of these individuals together has led to some fantastic innovations, because you also do quite a lot in aspects of the virtual world as well, don't you? Is it the V-Step response simulator? That's one of your products. And I think, because Ian Batchelor, I've done some work with him before. He was a guest on one of yours, really incredibly passionate, experienced, articulate individual. And you've really stepped into the fold of the virtual aspect of it.
We have. So we're actually worked with V-Step, who are the manufacturers of Response Simulator. They're a Dutch-based company. They approached us last year to see would we be interested in becoming their distributor for the UK market based on who we supply to, predominantly emergency services. And we will only ever look at another product from an outside company if we feel it fits within the ethos of the business. So one, does it add value to our customers? Does it fit within the quality aspect? I mean, you see from our strapline for professionals who save lives. Does it help fulfill that requirement? Are we helping professionals who save lives? And we felt that obviously that this product, it does fulfill that requirement.
Absolutely.
So we actually took a leap of faith, and we moved into the virtual world, providing virtual training solutions.
I love that.
So essentially, Response Simulator, it's a full 3D virtual environment that allows for incident command training for candidates to be fully immersed in a scenario, and then obviously issue a response strategy to a particular input, then be able to be assessed on that criteria as well. It's a completely new world for us.
We've spoke about so many different types of product development there, and Stu, I know a big part of what you do now is innovation. So what are some of the biggest ways that Ruth Lee is innovating at the minute?
So there's a whole variety of different projects that we're looking to kick off at the moment, and one of them we sort of previously touched on is the realism within articulation. So obviously we know that the mannequins are fairly accurate in terms of how limbs move, but there are limitations. So for example, we're looking at things like the knee and the elbow joints, and how can we stop that hyperextension on those joints and make it more realistic?
Without having too many plastic components where it feels like jarring.
Exactly.
You've got to slip your arms underneath it. So they do want to pass through if you try to pick it up. But like you say, the hyperextension of the elbow. And otherwise, you don't see people being realistic with them when they drag their knees around doorways. And you're like, well, it wouldn't do that. It would get caught. So you need to manage it.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously one of the big driving factors at the moment is that obviously we've started to do a lot more within the healthcare sector, moving and handling. So obviously we want to be able to make sure that the mannequins are more realistic in terms of how they're seated. So being able to fit.
I suppose that is a massive market, isn't it? I mean, a couple of companies we've been speaking with have been either supporting more or moving more into that care sector. I mean, even we had Blue Light Card on not so long ago, and they're doing a massive push to support the care workers, because these are people that they of course are frontline workers, but they're very much the aspect of the hidden hero, because care workers, they're expected to do so much, and sometimes their pay and conditions and blah 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 doesn't reflect what they're asked to do. They're not always given the best equipment, and it can lead to a lot of poor manual handling, and often they don't necessarily, I don't want to stereotype, receive as much training as perhaps they should. So it's wonderful to see a company like yours recognising that and trying to find innovative ways to support them.
It's true, because I mean, statistically in the health and care sector workers are one of the most at-risk groups from injury, and that is due to poor lifting and handling usually.
Also, numbers of personnel.
The manual handling training aspect of it is so important for them, and it's the same situation, I suppose. What instigated the fire service using it? After a while, you don't want to be using the youngest in the team and getting a volunteer to do that. It's dangerous.
But equally, we got away with it. We got away with
it
because there's 3 or 4 members of the team, and we'll often get called to support a care worker or a member of the ambulance, even if they're riding by themselves.
Sure.
We go because there's usually at least 4 of us are strong men and or women. So we kind of get away with okay manual handling approaches, but there's more of you. Whereas what realistically needs to be happening is companies investing in people like yourselves to come up with those solutions so that it doesn't we don't have to rely on who's the biggest, who's the strongest. You know, I'm a big guy. People, obviously this isn't a visual platform, but I'm quite a big, strong guy, and I'll often step in because I just think, oh, well, I would do because I'm stronger than so-and-so. I don't want them to hurt themselves. But that shouldn't need to be the case.
No, training is improving as well from that aspect. I mean, within health and social care, and particularly healthcare, you know, there's things, initiatives like single-handed care where, you know, people being trained to correctly move somebody if they are on their own. And there's ways that you can safely do that if you know how, but it's knowing how. And then to teach somebody to do that, you need a body to do that. And actually that's when the mannequins become useful at that point in time. So during the pandemic is really when it's taken off for us during healthcare, really, because I suppose it was that situation where, you know, certain training is mandatory. You can't stop it. So during the pandemic, it was like they previously would have used each other in training, and actually now it's the situation like, oh well, how are we going to do this training, which is required by law, and to keep us safe, so quite rightly required by law. How are we going to do that and socially distance? And
you don't want to get that close, you know. And we do get really close to people, trying to lift people through a doorway and stuff like that. You're right up close to them, and you're so right. It's not realistic in this current climate.
No, it's not possible, and you know, it just provides that extra. Takes one person out of the equation, doesn't it? So you know, if you're thinking on numbers, it just helps in that regard to sort of minimise the human to human contact, and then of course you're not risking each other either. You're not going to bash someone's head against the wall or drop somebody. All the rest of it,
part of training, there's an aspect of I don't even want to say failure, but we always say, hey, there's a great teaching point there, and hopefully the teaching point isn't you just drop Stuart on his head. I mean, the teaching point is let's try a different method, because I'll be honest, I've filled in reports where people have tried to maneuver somebody on a stretcher and they haven't put the straps on properly and the person's fell off. But the problem is half of them has fell off and the other half stayed on.
We've all seen those videos on YouTube, won't we, where people have dropped people on their heads and stuff out, and basket stretchers and all sorts.
Yeah, and that is going to happen in training sometimes, but it doesn't have to happen with the cost of human life and or injury and or time off work. There's resources out there. So when we're talking about, you know, customers, services, sectors investing in this equipment, it's all very well and good. We've always heard the analogy though of, you know, all the gear and no idea. How much of a transition process and how much of a training process comes from the guidance that you guys provide? I mean, you obviously have various online platforms now. How much support, Stu, do they get from yourselves when they're making these sorts of purchases?
So obviously, part of our sales approach with our customers is it's always very consultative. So it's a case of, you know, a customer can get in touch with us, we'll have a conversation with them, and they'll say, look, this is our training requirements, this is what we need to do, and we will then find them the best solution. If that's not a product we currently manufacture, then we'll look to, okay, well, what can we do to support them? How can we create something that is suitable for them? And so it's always been a very collaborative approach that we've taken with our customers to get them the right training need.
It's not like you go, look, we've got 50 dog mannequins we can't shift. You could just put a few of these together and maybe that'd be the best way to go. It's very much no, that's wonderful to see, because I know and that does happen. Let's be realistic. Some people will get steered. You've probably seen it in previous businesses where you'll try and steer customers to a product that we need to get rid of or unload. But like you've said, the nature of the fact that you've gone into the time to, you know, come up with at least 20 different variations gives you then the freedom to give great customer care, I suppose.
That's it. And I suppose the other aspect of it is as well, from our point of view, we always manufacture to order, vast majority of times. Yeah. So we don't keep a massive stock holding products.
I know, I've tried to get hold of one. I'm joking.
No, to be fair, we always try to fulfill customer requirements within a certain time period. And even if we do have at times extended lead times, we always make sure if there is an immediate training need, if someone has got a training requirement that has to be fulfilled in a certain time period, they're prioritised.
Yeah, we're not very good at saying no, really.
I know, you know.
I think that's the thing.
In the same way, you've been really good, because I know I'm joking there, but I work a lot with Cheshire Fire Challenge Team, British Firefighter Challenge Team. They all are in alignment and media partners of the podcast, and I know. I mean, it was kind of lucky, because when we were looking at getting hold of stuff, they all wanted Ruth Lee, but they weren't. You know, they'd never had communications with you guys before, so they weren't sure how engaged you would be. But they wanted the best. You know, they wanted firefighters dragging these individuals as part of an athletic, challenging, realistic environment, and Ruth Lee was exactly where they all wanted to go. So I know you've provided dummies for them, and it's great that they recognised they wanted the best, and they got it.
Yeah, the British Firefighter Challenge we sort of started, I think it was the very first one. I think we've been with those guys. So it was a good opportunity and good timing, I suppose, because I think it was in the first year that I started, and Paul, our managing director, he'd not long been with the business as well, and we knew that firefighter challenges were, a popular thing all around the world, and a big deal. So when the opportunity came up with the British Firefighter Challenge, we did want to sort of help and support that, because we thought, actually, when you look at the firefighter challenges in other countries, and they sometimes use the plastic mannequins,
they're rubbish. I went to Germany, and I know you're not going to say it, but I went to Germany and used it, and they are big, horrible plastic dummies. They hurt my forearms, and they weren't realistic.
Well, the thing with the plastic ones, when you're doing them in the context of the firefighter challenges, our mannequins are a proper dead weight. The plastic ones will act as a pivot point, so that actually makes your job a little bit easier.
Yep.
Because they will rest the feet on the floor, and then you're just dragging at a certain point, aren't you? Whereas ours are, if you can drag one of ours on that course, you're a hero.
All unconscious casualties sit up nicely for you and hold their arms out straight, obviously.
Yeah, well, exactly. Wouldn't that be nice if they did?
No, it is. It's a great opportunity for you guys to be part of something like that, because it does get massive exposure. But again, there'll be lots of, well, not lots, but there'll be other companies in there who have probably fallen over themselves. I can just speak on a British Firefighter Challenge. They've been approached by other individuals that are willing to give stuff. And we're like, oh, actually, it's not really a case of that, because we actually wanted the best, and it was just so happens to be that the best wanted to work with us as well. So it's one of those.
Oh, that's good to know. I mean, we were really pleased to be able to support it, and we've supported every year since it started, and it's a great day. We love it. We love seeing when we get the chance to go ourselves. It's always really good fun, really inspiring. The photographs that we get afterwards are awesome, and it's just been a good opportunity to help out there.
Firefighters love getting a photo of themselves, right? I mean, we joke about it when I came back onto this Zoom call. Then my bloody photos of me in a firefighting challenge. So I say that with all due respect, and I'm no better than anybody else. I love what I do. What can I say? Anyway.
Funnily enough, I can look outside my window at the van parked on the driveway here, and on the side it is a photo from the firefighter challenge on the side.
Oh, there you go. Wow. Good photos, you see.
It just says it all, doesn't it? I wanted to move into some of the other aspects, because we speak about transformational training, and more specifically still, I wanted to ask you about some of the collaboration work that Ruth Lee has done with different sectors, because that's taken, I mean, like you say, you've ran a few webinar style things over this year. What have been some of the other outcomes of that, and where's the sort of company moving towards in the later parts of this year?
So, I mean, one of the biggest collaborations we've done is actually working with another company. So we've worked with Lifeboat, the body simulation, to actually develop a completely new mannequin, which is a world first mannequin. It's the world's first ultra-realistic drowning mannequin. So
I saw that when people were doing some of the intubation, when they were doing some of the CPR aspects because a drowning casualty is a very, very different thing. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's completely fine. So so myself and Sarah were on Wednesday of last week doing the final test of the product with Olm's outreach medical skills up in Castle Curry, and essentially we did a full water rescue scenario with the mannequin in the water going through to obviously the rescue. And then obviously the clinical side of things afterwards. It's working in collaboration with companies like that to develop new products.
It's always scary when you get involved with a new company, though, isn't it? And I know, obviously, the fact that you're willing to mention it today would suggest that the relationship is going very, very well. But Ruth Lee have created something so special, so unique. You're an industry leader. I would not be astonished to hear if many other companies have approached you to try and do some working together. Going on board with somebody like that, there must have been some trepidation, but obviously you ran some drills, you've done simulations, you've invested in this new product, and the outcomes are positive. How did it all go?
I mean, that's the key, really, isn't it? It's choosing the right partner and making sure that their business and the ethos behind their business marries up with your own. We wouldn't work with somebody who didn't feel the same way that we felt about our customers.
They've got to get it, haven't they? Quote unquote, get it.
Absolutely. And Lifecast comes from a really interesting background, so their skill with the life casting comes from the movie industry, but they also have extremely good medical skills in-house. They know that trained paramedics, they have lectured at university, they know what they're talking about, and they passionately believe that what they do makes a difference, and that's why it was a good pairing, really.
So I suppose this really helps us in completing that sort of, I'm going to get the names wrong now, but we call it like a golden chain of life. In effect, like if we think of a road traffic collision, before we get there, what's happened, when we get there, how quickly can we extricate the person, and then there comes our main collaboration aspect, I suppose, as frontline workers, where we hand them over. And if I throw that analogy into a water rescue simulation, yes, your dummies are absolutely the best thing since sliced bread. When it goes into going into the water and rescuing a realistic casualty, then comes the aspect of, because you could be out, I think of your RNLI example, you could be 20 miles from shore. So there needs to be that aspect of giving life-saving ongoing care, absolutely. And if you haven't got a mannequin that can support that, you kind of drag the mannequin on board and then you have to switch to something else, or the next part of the training starts. But how does the product work, if either of you could go into the detail of that as confidently as you feel you can, to support that aspect of it? Because I imagine it's got some sort of a simulated respiratory system, is it?
Essentially, yeah. So the way that the mannequin works on the principle of something called hydrostatic squeeze. So that's essentially that the pressure of the water outside seals the lung system. So you can obviously simulate what in effect is dry drowning. That obviously you've got water within the throat area, and it doesn't then transfer into the lung system. So you can, when you ventilate it with a bag of valve mask, then you obviously get that very bubbling sound effect. It's something which is very realistic in terms of dry drowning. So, and then you've also got the capability to also simulate wet drowning. So obviously introducing water into the lung system.
People sometimes struggle with the differences between them. So dry drowning is, i.e. someone's experienced, they've been submersed in water, something has gotten in there, and people think that once they've got them out of water, the threat is gone. But they'll have a lot of fluid and or mucus inside the lungs, which can have a later effect. And then obviously our medical support staff can induce them with a number of chemicals which can help overcome that. But trying to simulate that, it can be very difficult.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you can do with this mannequin. You can simulate the whole scenario. It's got a very realistic, in fact, ultra realistic appearance. So you can introduce OPM ways, NPO ways, iGel, etc. So you can do full intubation with it, ventilate it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a step above what we're used to manufacturing.
I love that you also do. I think when I was looking at the research, you do like a black one for the rescues as well. Because I've been in it where we've tried to do water rescue simulations before, and you have your incident commander come up, and I'll be acting as an occupant or facilitator of it, and I'll say like, oh, so and so fell off the side of the canal. It was ages ago. It was somewhere down there. I don't know where they are. And it's difficult because the mannequins, by design, the older ones, are very obvious. You can see them. They're very colourful, and sometimes will have reflective strips on them. But you've also done some that assist in the search and rescue aspect of it as well.
Yeah, essentially. So we have the man overboard, which is the bright orange one that's very conspicuous. You can see it from probably half a mile away. But yeah, so we also have the search and rescue variant, which is manufactured in the exact same way. It has the same buoyancy levels, but it's supplied with black overalls and it's supplied with a mesh hood that goes over the head.
Because if it's a rescue worker, then yes, they might be dressed in high visibility. If it's somebody that's out at sea, they'll be in high visibility. But chances are, if we're going doing search and rescue down a canal or something like that, this person may not be dressed with the anticipation that they might go overboard. I'm sure when they planned their original part of their day, they didn't plan on going in the water.
No.
So, Stu, from a selfish perspective, we spoke about some of the RNLI stuff, we thought about some of the water rescue stuff, but a big thing I was excited to hear about was more of the fire simulation aspect. So what sort of steps forward have we taken with that?
Yeah, so essentially around about 5 years ago now, we were approached by our Dutch distributor, Fireware. So Fireware have supplied our training mannequins in the Netherlands for about probably in excess of 10 years now. And they asked whether we would be interested in supplying their training products into the UK market. So as I've mentioned previously, we'll only ever work with companies that are happy with the quality and obviously.
I'm sure lots of people will be interested in your access to the UK market.
Exactly, that's it. But having worked with Fireware and knowing their ethos and how they operate as a company, they're very similar to us and family owned. Basically, it's a husband and wife who run the business, and their background is in theatrics. They worked within the theatre industry, and Seth in particular is very passionate. And I've known Seth on a personal level now for a number of years. He was part of his thesis when he was at university. They had a fire warden come in. They were talking about fire training as part of the thesis, and they said that, fire warden put a traffic cone in front of them with a flashing light on top and said, "This is the fire, and this is what we do." Hang on a second, you've come to present fire warden training to a group of pediatric students who are used to working in special effects.
Yep, very creative individuals.
Exactly, and so Seth said, "Well, how can I bring that theatre world into fire training to make it more realistic. And so I personally and the director really bought into that concept. And so we've started working with them to introduce not just their range of smoke generators, but also fire simulation in terms of lighting and sound, and how you can introduce that to make a more realistic scenario.
100%.
So we've worked quite closely with Fireware on developing a range of things, and I've actually personally set up some scenarios. So I worked with the Conway Tunnel in North Wales, part of the Mid and North Wales Trunk Road Agency, and we simulated a full car fire scenario within the middle of the Conway Tunnel for North Wales Fire and Rescue Service to come in and have a large multi-agency scale exercise. So we introduced smoke machines, we introduced sound effects, we introduced lighting to make it look as though there was.
I think the lighting aspect of it is great. If you can get more of that, because one of the biggest things I plan the training for a few different aspects in our role, but as a crew commander, it's something that I do. We'll try and find as interesting places as possible, derelict buildings, interesting parts of the local area, to try and simulate a drill. But if you haven't got the resources like a portable smoke generator or the lighting or the effects or a bit of sound, it's harder to get people to buy into it. And if you can't make the training authentic and realistic, it really just diminishes it, because people drop out of the mindset that you want to get them to really act effectively as an operational responder.
That's it. I mean, we actually introduced, I think it was actually Sarah's concept, the 5 senses training concept. And this scenario, the idea is the more senses that you can stimulate within a training scenario,
100%.
The more realistic it becomes. So by being able to introduce the visual cues of the lighting, introducing the sound effects, but then also introducing things like scent as well. So you can introduce the actual burning scent, that burning smell within the smoke fluid. It just adds to that whole training scenario, makes it more realistic.
Even if you just had a room that didn't necessarily have a fire in it, but you simulated heat, that would be a massive aspect. If you simulated that safely in a room without the requirement for fire, that would be far less of an environmental impact if you can get that smell, light. You're thinking of your 5 senses. We want that. I mean, it echoes back to the dummies again. We want that feel. It needs to feel realistic when we pick the casualty up. It needs to be hot. It needs to have poor visibility. We need to have that sound, that social pressure, that screaming of an external environment, of a casualty, of their family members who are expecting you to act. These are all of those senses. And I love that you've gone there with that.
Yeah. And that's, part of the concept for us as an organisation is that we want to help make training as realistic as possible. And because if your training's realistic, it helps prepare you for the real world scenario. Sarah's done a lot of blogs in the past about muscle memory and how train as though it's real. That's really important for us as an organisation, and that's why we try to make the mannequins as realistic as possible. That's why we use the fire simulation product to help make the training scenario as realistic as possible.
Yeah, it's just not fair, is it, to expect a trainee to come into the service, whether that's ambulance, fire, or any emergency service really, and just expect them to sort of cope in those highly stressful situations where, as you said, there could be people screaming, there could be smoke billowing, there could be sounds and smells and anything that they've not experienced before.
You're setting them up to fail,
now do your job.
You're setting them up to fail. And then when it happens and they go, oh, well, we never had this and it'll be a case of, well, we didn't have the facilities to do it. Well, now there is the facilities out there, so there's no excuse.
No, and adrenaline will get you so far in terms of, how you behave, but it also can have a detrimental effect. And so you want to make sure that people experience as close as possible to the things that they might experience, because you can just be a lot more assured that they're going to be confident to do their job.
Yeah, we talk about overstimulation. If you get stimulated to a certain extent, that's great. But if you get too excited because you're facing too many unknowns, then that can very quickly overwhelm you, and common sense, the practices, everything that we've practiced time and time again can go out the window. But if you can eliminate as many of those unknowns as possible by introducing them all in a controlled environment, then the leap between fairly realistic and real is going to be much shorter gap, and people can step over that gap with competency.
Absolutely. And, you go into the fire service wanting to make a difference and potentially save lives, and unfair to expect somebody to be able to just react so competently if they've not had that experience. So anything that adds to that, whether it's the mannequins or the fire simulation or even the virtual reality training we were talking about before, anything that adds that level of skill and confidence, I can do this, then that makes a big difference at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Love it. And it seems like you guys are pretty much slowly closing off all of the loops in terms of the full package. It now becomes the physical product, the virtual aspect, the assistance in making sure we're getting the right fit for the right company, for the right brand, for the right service. It doesn't appear there's many avenues you haven't got, but you've also been humble enough to go to those industry experts, both the frontline personnel and also other companies, and make those collaborations. We always preach about about collaboration in the fire service and the police and the ambulance and stuff like that, and say, oh, we need to work more together. And there's no excuse in the public services, whereas in a corporate environment, it's like, well, we don't want to necessarily share all of our secrets, but you guys obviously are happy to take those risks because ultimately it's serving something bigger than yourselves.
Well, this is, for us, working with Lifecast, we don't have the technical capability to manufacture that type of product. And obviously Lifecast, their background is more medical based. And so we knew there was the requirement for this training product. I've been basically asked for water rescue airway management. I'd say for at least the past 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And people say, look, we need...
Every time we visit a certain customer, we get asked for it, don't we?
We do.
And that must have been frustrating for a period of time.
Yeah.
It has been. So the fact to be able to bring now a product to market that still has training requirements.
I bet you're falling over yourself to tell them about it when the question comes around. The big long list of people that have asked in the past, and you're running over to them. Well, we've got it now.
Exactly. That's it. Exactly. So for us, it's important to, if we don't have the technical capability to do something ourselves, but we know there's a requirement to do it, then we'll seek out those companies that can help us do that.
I think that's a benefit as well of being like a company that started small and is growing. The business will go where it needs to go because that's the approach that we take. So if there's a need in the market and we've seen it and our customers need something to help with their training, then we'll look for ways to be able to move in that direction to help them, because the tagline, professionals who save lives, that's what it's all about. So if we can make sure we have stuff that is going to fill that need, and whatever that is, it could take us in whatever direction, I suppose. We'll always be making mannequins, that we're known for, but there's exciting times ahead, and as things change, so does training change, so we've got to make sure that we can adapt at the same time.
But you're still operating, like you say, you're now a big company with that small company feel, the authenticity.
Absolutely,
of when Ruth was like, well, let me go and speak to so-and-so and let me go and speak to this, and I think I can come up with a solution for that, and that's still arguably the biggest part of the company now.
It does have a small family feel still to the company. Ruth, the factory in Corwin, Ruth still lives down the road. Susan lives down the road. They'll pop in and see how people are, and they know everybody on first terms names, and they've known them for a long time. And it's important, I suppose, that element of it as well, because everyone who works in that factory has the same passion. We're quite keen to make sure that they know what happens with the products where they go, because it's one thing to be sat in a factory making mannequins all day, but actually the context of actually that mannequin has helped such a body be able to train to do this, and they're really proud of that. So I think that's really good.
Be connecting that with the end user and saying, look, this is where that went, these are the people we were able to help, and there's no shortage of fantastic photos that we've referenced already of people in all the different industries pulling a Ruth Lee casualty out of a river.
Well, you can never say that to a marketing. You can never say that to a marketing person. I can never have too many photos.
I'm sure when the BFC rolls around again this year, there'll be a whole fresh batch of all sorts of shapes and sizes of people.
Well, that's what makes it such an interesting company, I suppose, because going back to that, there's photos of all sorts of things that you would never have. When I started working here, certainly, I never would have believed I'd have seen, things being rescued off the top of pylons that are like hundreds of feet in the air, things being rescued off roller coasters, all sorts of stuff. And
stuff you'd have to usually pay people a lot of money to go and do. They're willing to do it for free because they want to use the kit.
Exactly.
Well, we see just such interesting training, and it's like, we think we can think of good ideas, but wow, some of the things that people set up is
that's great, isn't it?
Phenomenal, really.
Absolutely love it. Stu, Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really enjoyed being able to tiptoe inside the world of Ruth Lee and learn a little bit more about where it's come from and how you've diversified, yet still remained so true to the passion of helping emergency responders, helping our frontline workers become more efficient, more effective in their training. And I really want to thank you for sparing some time today to share that with us.
You're welcome.
No problem at all.
Awesome. And I will hopefully look forward to seeing you very soon at the Emergency Services Show later this year.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed everything goes on.
Beautiful. And I'll probably close it off there. I think we've got a few minutes left, but are you guys happy with that?
I don't know whether you know, Pete, from your research, but we won the Queen's Award last year.
I didn't know
for
that.
Export. So it was a pretty big deal. We're a small company in Wales, and we won the Queen's Award for export. So
I did read you're in like 34 distributors or something like that across the world.
Yeah, there's more. I think there's more than that now. We've got, I think it's over 40 distributors, and we sell to every continent on the planet. I love being able to say that. Just I don't know whether we've had one in space, but that's one of those have to know.
It's the final frontier, apparently. So I'm sure you'll get there. You'll be the first ones to go there.
Oh, brilliant. Cheers.
Beautiful.
Thanks a lot, Pete.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day. I'll speak to you soon.
You
take care.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
But there we have it, folks. That was Stu and Sarah from Ruth Lee Ltd. I took so much away from that. I love how they went into real detail. Some of the stuff that Stu was speaking about, especially with some of these new water rescue dummies. Seeing how they've innovated it to really bring in the complications of dry drowning, wet drowning, and how we now have a resource that we can use as like a whole training package. Nothing more frustrating as a training facilitator when you have to worry about having the right dummies, having the right things, and having to pretend more than you need to because you just haven't got the resources. Super excited to learn more about the V-Step Response Simulator as well. That's a really great innovation. If you haven't used it as part of your Instant Command training program, be sure to ask for it from your local training provider or get in contact with the Ruth Lee team themselves. It's a really great resource, really realistic. It was really great to spend that time with Stu and Sarah today, working hard through the pandemic, making sure that when everything lifts, when training can get back to normal, we are going to have some fantastic toys to play with. Because we all know there's some incredibly challenging people to work with in the emergency services, and you don't want to have any more dummies than is necessary on the training ground, but when one is absolutely necessary. It's great to see that Ruth Lee will always be there to provide the very best in rescue training mannequins. Thanks once again for coming back for the Firefighters podcast. I hope you learned something today. I hope you took some value away from it. I hope when you're making your Christmas list for training resources in the future, it will of course involve one of the many new innovations that has come from Ruth Lee. So check the notes out, head over to the website, get in contact with Stu, Sarah and the team. For sure you have the very best resources when setting up your next training. And even if you're not quite sure what you need, getting on a call with Stu, with Sarah, with a member of the team, and allowing them to help steer you in the right direction so you get exactly what you need to support your personnel in any training environment. Thanks once again for coming up for the Firefighters podcast. Thanks once again for touching base with the voice of the emergency services. If you've enjoyed it, hit subscribe, hit follow, check the notes below. There's always some goodies in there. Sign up to a notification so you get the very first drop of the next episode as soon as it comes out, and we'll see you right back here real soon with another incredible guest on the Firefighters podcast. We'll see you soon.